One way of thinking of what we're doing in surrender is selfishly hoarding our attention. When we withdraw our attention from the changing objects of the world, both the external world of perception and the internal world of thoughts and feelings, it goes to the only place that is left automatically, which is, we might call it, quote unquote, the self. But it's not exactly accurate to say that the attention goes there, because the self is not an object that can be focused on. But when you withdraw your attention from objects, the only place that it can settle is that thought which is subtler than the subtlest. It is, as someone once said, the space that remains after a holy prayer is chanted. It is like the taste of holy water. It is like the imperceptible smoothness within which all the changing, nameable, describable objects move. And that holy water is so sweet that we would be wise to simply and only drink from it. It's the nectar of immortality. It's the honey of pure happiness. And it is constant, whether we think we notice it or not. But surrender is the active, one might say, as I say somewhat jokingly, selfish refusal to leave that stockpile of honey even for a second, and to turn our attention to anything which is an inferior level of subtlety. And this withdrawal from the objects of the world, which is actually nothing other than a taking pleasure in what is, and what is, in fact, is the heart of pleasure, is marked by effortlessness. See, there's a constant current of thoughts that want us, that are pulling us to do, to pretend that we're doing, because the truth is we're not doing anything. To pretend that we are engaged in this thing called decision-making and effort. And they present all kinds of lures and fishhooks, pleasure or the avoidance of pain or relationships, duty, all kinds of concepts for why it is we might latch on to this doing thing. But if we are wise, we kind of stay in position, and rather than trying to move in the world, we simply cease to pretend that we are moving, and so the world moves, quote unquote, through us. And therefore, we reap the rewards of effortless spectating. Effortless watching. But note, this is not the same as trying to watch the things in the world, because that's another thought. That would require effort. That would be a doing. And the quality of our watching would differ from moment to moment. Things would change, and we would have to be in this state, right, which is often talked about by people as being so wonderful, right, of being of this sort of hyper alert tension to nuances of everything, right? Like, oh, I'm drinking this water and I'm noticing that it's so cool and clear and crisp or whatever it is. But that is an effortful noticing and watching of a particular phenomenon. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is I'm not going to worry about watching anything in particular. I'm not going to try to watch. In fact, I'm going to try, in a way, not to watch. I'm going to try not to be lured in by any of the offers on hand to exert effort. And so, by doing so, I actually enjoy the status of effortless watcher, which is a completely different thing. It's not the idea that you're watching. It is the watching that is one's nature and goes on automatically. And this kind of watching is in a sense no watching at all, because it watches nothing in particular, because it doesn't draw boundaries and close what the experience is. It doesn't say this is this or that. Even when the thoughts arise that this is this or that, even when the thoughts arise of names and forms, if the attention is hoarded inward, if one is sort of staying centered, how to be centered? By not being lured away. That's how, right? It's not as if one is trying to stay in some particular center. The center is not being lured away. That's it. That is it. Non-grasping, non-reaction, not being lured away, and yet being attentive. The attentive awareness, which is unlured and ungrasping, is automatically centered. That's what we mean by centered. It's not that there is a center to which one points to or tries to focus on. That would be another thought. By moving away from the changing objects while staying attentive, alert, and aware of nothing in particular, basically, of no particular thing, we remain in effortless, centered, natural watching of nothing in particular, which in some sense can barely be called watching. But it is in fact the most exquisite sense of awareness. So that smooth, subtle, indescribable, not an object, not a thought, which is our true nature and which is effortless, simply stay, and allow the events of the world to flow through. Because when you call worlds bluff and you refuse to allow your attention to wander outward, and you refuse any of the world's calls for your voluntary engagement, then the phenomena flow of their own accord. And the effortless being through which those phenomena flow. The effortless, aware, watching being of that is total happiness. What could be more beautiful than an infinite stream of creation, continuously changing and yet somehow always the same, and for which you need exert zero effort? And by the doings of which you cannot be touched. You are beyond help and harm, beyond time and space. Nothing is sweeter than that. Surrender simply says, stop deluding yourself into thinking that this or that trinket is worth your attention, is worth your effort. Stop focusing on one drop of water here or there, and then the ocean of phenomena and the unspeakable medium through which that ocean moves shall be yours.